Today we're going to be going over lighteners. If you're with me in the book, it's page 628, and I'll be using the newest Milady book. But you don't need the book. This is just if you're following along, but there's also key points in the description box as well as timestamps if you just want to jump around. Lightener is bleach. You can also call it decolorizer, but the most common term we're going to use is lightener. It sounds a lot nicer than saying we're going to bleach your hair. We're going to lighten your hair today. But essentially, lightener is bleach, and all it does is lighten the hair. So just like if you pour bleach on a black shirt or this weird puffy square shoulder jacket I'm wearing, it will decolorize it and turn it yellow, pink, until eventually it would get to white. So when we bleach or lighten the hair, we're doing the same thing. Only difference is our bleach or lightener needs a developer for it to work. So if you take this cream lightener from Sally's and put it on the hair just straight out of the tube, it's not going to do anything. All lightener has to be paired with a developer or hydrogen peroxide. So that's gonna be your 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50, and if you're super silly, 60. When we mix lightener with the developer, it releases oxygen, and that process is called oxidation. Pretend this is a blown up single strand of hair. We have the outer layer, cuticle, then over here we have the cortex, and in the very middle we have the medulla. Here's your lightener. When you apply the lightener on the hair, it's going to break through the cuticle. Remember, that's the turtle shell or the shellac shell, clear protective layer, and it's going straight through the cortex, or straight through to the cortex. This is where the oxidation process is happening, in the cortex. And what it's doing when it's there is it slowly, well, depending on what volume developer you're using, it's breaking up the melanin and making it lighter. So you start dark and you eventually get lighter, and it's just busting through that. Does that make sense? How much lift you're going to get is determined by the lightener and the developer. Certain brands of lightener work better than others. You just have to kind of find the one that suits your needs best. And developers, remember from our last video, 30 is going to work faster than 10 volume. So 10 is the weakest, 40 is the strongest. So hair by itself on the pH scale is about here, 4.5 to 5.5. This is your hair. When you put lightener on the hair, the pH jumps all the way to this area. It can be a 9, 10, 11. It really depends on the formula. For reference, when you use permanent hair color, you're living right about here. So you're still doing a pretty big jump, but you're going way up towards the soap and drain cleaner when you are talking about hair bleach or hair lightener. So just something to consider, you're taking hair way out of range when you start lightening it. So after your application is done, you'll want to make sure that you bring it back home with some kind of pH balancing shampoo or conditioner or treatment. Otherwise, a lot of damage is going to happen. The hair's already more exposed to damage because it's getting brittle, lighter. So you want to make sure you always follow up with a treatment after you're bleaching. Because you're altering the hair so much and it's jumping way out of its home, this can alter the hair texture. So if you have a client that has super curly hair and you put lightener on it, sometimes it's going to turn it into more of a wave or even straight. When we mix up lightener, you always want to follow the manufacturer's directions because they're all different. It's kind of hard to see, but it'll say mix in a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 ratio, or that's what this one says. So usually you'll have a ratio. It can be 1-to-1, 1-to-1.5, 1-to-2, 1-to-2.5, 1-to-3, could even be 1-to-4. So all this means if you're doing a 1-to-1, the first number is your bleach or lightener. The second number is your developer. So if I use an ounce of lightener, I'm using an ounce of developer. 1-to-2, 1 ounce of lightener plus 2 ounces of developer. And it doesn't matter the measurement. So again, 1-to-1, 1 solo cup of lightener, 1 solo cup of developer. 1 tiny cap full of lightener, 1 tiny cap full of developer. 1 scoop of lightener if you're using the scoops that come in the tub to 1 scoop of developer. The thicker consistency is obviously going to be the 1-to-1. You have 1 part lightener to 1 part developer. So this represents the bleach. The colon just separates the two numbers, and red will be our developer. So if you do a 1, 2, 3, 1 part bleach to 3 parts developer. So it's going to be more runny. The thicker consistency, the 1-to-1, is going to dry up quicker, but it is stronger. And why you would use different ratios really depends on your application. If you're gonna do a free-handed technique like a balayage where you're not putting it into foils or using mini foils, you'll want to use a 1-to-1 where it's very thick, and probably use a clay lightener. 1-to-3 will weaken the formula a bit, but it could be for an all-over lightener. Wouldn't put it in foils, it would be too liquidy. It'd be sliding out everywhere. And then in your book on 629, we're in the middle paragraph, it says to never free pour, which is just to never eyeball the formula. You always want to use a scale if you can, so that way the formula is always the same. Now we're moving on to the types of lighteners. So we have oil, cream, powder, and clay. This is what oil lightener looks like. You mix the powder with the oil activator. I don't use oil at all. It is very expensive to use, but the reasoning for it, it creates a protective barrier with the oil for when you're doing on the scalp applications. Cream lightener like this is more cost effective. It's literally just a cream consistency. You can use cream lightener inside the foil or on the scalp. It also creates a little bit of a barrier to help the scalp so it doesn't burn and protect it. Because remember, when we're lightening, our scalp is producing heat, and heat will help activate the lightener. So when you put lightener directly on the scalp, a lot of irritation can come in, burning, hot roots. So to avoid that, you want to do the roots last so you don't get the hot roots. And anytime you're using lightener on the scalp, you need to use one that's safe for the scalp, like this one. Powder lightener is the most common. You can find it in the little packets, in tubs. Now they make them in the recyclable cardboard containers. And powder lighteners look just like powder. You have to read the back of the lightener, but some of them can be used on the scalp and some of them are just meant for off the scalp applications. So foils, balayage, anything that doesn't directly touch the scalp. Clay lighteners are for off the scalp applications. Most commonly, you're going to use these when you do freehand painting balayage. Clay lighteners are a thicker consistency and they don't swell or expand like most powder lighteners. They just kind of stay put. So when you paint them on the hair, they create almost a tortoise shell or a protective layer. But when you mash into it, it stays moist. Can we think of another word? It stays wet. So basically clay lighteners just create that little shell over them and they stay put. So when you're painting on the lightener, you don't have to put it over a foil. So again, they're more for hand painting techniques.